Do you think we're closer to nuclear war now because of this action?
100%.
So you think this has moved us closer there?
100%. And I've got, there's proof of that all over the headlines today because France is deploying air-launched nuclear warheads. Air-launched nuclear warheads. That means small warheads that fit on the ends of airplane rockets. They're deploying them all over Europe. That means France is now taking its nuclear arsenal and spreading it across its European allies. The more nuclear proliferation, the more risk of nuclear war.
That's just as much a part of Ukraine and
that has nothing to do with Iran.
Why? Yeah.
That has nothing to do with Iran. It happened 2 days after Iran.
The threat of nuclear war comes from the conflict, in my opinion, comes from the conflict in Iran, from the war in Ukraine and comes from Russia. Because you have an actual superpower president who has threatened the use of nuclear weapons. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, so it's not a nuclear threat.
You speak a different nuclear language than I do. Russia is launching intercontinental ballistic missiles that can't be intercepted. It's got the Oreshnik. What the hell is it going to be afraid of a warhead on the tip of an airplane? It's not. That's a tactical nuke. That's a battlefield nuke.
But what is your point?
My point is that the deployment of a nuclear weapon is nuclear war. The deployment of a nuclear weapon.
Wait.
If you're talking about mutually assured destruction.
Are you talking about the use of a nuclear weapon or are you talking about putting a warhead on an aircraft?
No, that's been technology for a long time.
Right. So
using it in the battlefield.
But it's not being used in the battlefield. I agree with you 1,000%.
You don't think it's being, you think it is being used in the battlefield?
No, I'm saying it's being deployed. Is that getting us closer to nuclear war? Yes.
Yes, but it's not because of Iran.
It has nothing to do with Iran. And what are you talking about being deployed? Because you're talking about France maneuvering where its weaponry is.
That's the definition of a deployment.
That is, well, then we're talking about it. I'm talking about nuclear use. I mean, the United States deploys its nuclear forces all the time by President Trump saying, I'm moving our submarines, which is just talk because they're moving anyways. It's the same as it's threatening when Putin says I'm moving at my nuclear, or when he tests, Norway by popping up right outside of their shores. Those are maneuvers that are very dangerous. I absolutely agree.
Annie, but in this particular case, has even from a Russian perspective, has this war in Iran increased the probability that a Putin would use a nuclear weapon?
In my opinion, absolutely not. No. In my opinion, no. In my opinion, what it does to Putin is it makes him say, wow, this president is unpredictable. And to an authoritarian person like Putin, that's a match for him, not someone for him to walk on. And I think that I'm not saying that's a great way for world diplomacy whatsoever. It's not diplomacy. It's just, it's just strong-arming one another. But we are not, I do not feel at all that this situation makes us closer to a nuclear threat whatsoever.
I agree. I think it's a combination of Ukraine and China's military exercises and action in the South China Sea. And the whole sort of, what we're not seeing. There's this argument that China's watching what's going on with the U.S. and Iran. Here we are depleting our interceptors, our munitions. China's meanwhile stockpiling, its resources. And does this put us at a disadvantage if and when the day comes where China decides to take proactive, aggressive action vis-a-vis Tehran? That's something to think about. And I think then I'm worried about the risk of nuclear war in that instance. I don't think Iran by itself in a vacuum is moving the needle on that sort of nuclear risk meter.
To your point, what this is a boon for is the defense contractor world, is the military-industrial complex. Because, for example, part of why Iran is so weak is because they've used up so many ballistic missiles in their conflict with Israel.
I read today the interceptor to missile ratio, something like 25 to 1, that the interceptors needed to catch these ballistic missiles that Kuwait, the UAE, Israel is using. They're like upwards of 10, 15 times more expensive.
Yes.
And these drones are relatively cheaply made, these Shahed drones that they're using. So, there is that aspect of it too, that Iran can just fire like a madman, all these sort of expendable munitions. And meanwhile, we're spending 3, 4, 5, 10 times as much to intercept them.
Yes, although you do see in any kind of conflict like this, you always see new weapons on the battle. And that's what happened now. And America actually has been copying the Shahed drones, these cheap, we call them the Lucas, these cheap systems that can just go in and, cause havoc without precision. And we deployed them. So I think this was a long time.
Sorry to interrupt you, Stephen.
Well, I think this is one of the big questions that a lot of people are asking, which is how long can Iran fight for in this war? And what does that fight look like? Here in these jars, you have, I think it's the relative amount of soldiers that each country has. Now, obviously, soldiers are goes back to what Obama said about horses and bayonets. They're one form of combat. But I was quite surprised at how big Iran's military is relative to even the US, but other countries in the region. I think they have the biggest military in the region. Is that correct?
So we have to separate between the IRGC and the National Army. They serve two different functions.
What are those two things?
The IRGC, which Annie brought up earlier, so the I stands for Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, not Iranian. What does that mean? It's protecting the Islamic Revolution. It is an ideological army that sits outside of the main structures of power, accountable only to the supreme leader. The National Army really goes through the office of the presidency and others, and even though the supreme leader has a say in it, but the army's job is to protect Iran's borders. Mm-hmm. The IRGC's job is to protect the revolution and the ideology and the proxies and everything else that we have come to know about Iran. So if we look at what's in the jar, we have to separate what the National Army, which is only its job is to defend the borders, versus the ideological army. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what that would look like if we took out the National Army and are left with the ideological force.
Iran have the largest stockpile in the Middle East of missiles, drones, and air defenses, possessing thousands of ballistic cruise missiles and kamikaze drones. This is their primary offensive strength. And they have quite a significant defense budget as well. I guess the question I'm trying to get at is how long can they fight for? And how does that fight look over time? Because I know they shot hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles over the weekend.
Yeah. Israel claims that in the June war of last year, it eliminated about half of what it believes Iran's stockpiles, but also batteries, launchers, basically capability. So if whatever it was, let's say they have half of that left. I've seen statistics saying that really they can't go at this rate, Iran, for more than 2 to 3 weeks before they're completely depleted.
Well, there's also an interesting move that the United States did. While we didn't kill the supreme leader, what we did do was send our B-2s to take out underground missile systems, which Iran has.
Which are the aircrafts, right?
No, they're underground. They actually call them missile cities.
Yeah, the B-2s are the bombers.
Yes, they came from the United States. And this is considerable damage because the two ways in which these sort of rogue nations, whether it's North Korea or Iran, work their missiles is they have them on what are called road mobile launchers so that they cannot be tracked and targeted, or they bury them deeply underground. And one of the only things that can take out those deeply buried missile sites is a B-2, and that's what the United States sent.
So Andrew, how do you think this plays out over the coming weeks and months? Because at some point, they might run out of missiles, but that doesn't necessarily mean the war is over. Yeah. I'm presuming that the US don't want to throw soldiers on the ground in Iran either. So how does this play out, and how long?
And that's one of the major strategic errors that we made in attacking Iran. They have the benefit of time, not us. They can choose how to react, when to react, in what way to react. We don't know if they have a dirty bomb that they're finishing up in some underground bunker right now that's just going to sit there and wait until American boots on the ground show up. The fact that you guys think that current nuclear deployments have nothing to do with what's going on in Iran, I want to respect that opinion, but to me it shows just a lack of military experience and actual strategic intent to kill. Like when you look at how military and intelligence operators are trained to think, we are trained to think through a lens of maximum damage. Mm-hmm. Iran is thinking through the same window right now. And they're watching what we just did in Afghanistan. Don't forget, we killed Osama bin Laden, who was an ideological figurehead of al-Qaeda, in 2011 and didn't leave Afghanistan until 2022. When we gave up. That's another 11 years of war after the guy that we were supposed to kill to end the war. Khomeini is different. But how different? I don't know yet. And what are we going to do? The new leadership in Iran, what's it going to be? Is it going to be a leadership that kowtows to the United States? That kowtows to Israel? Is it going to be another shadow government like the Shah? Are we going to place somebody else and the Iranian people are going to love it? Or are we leaving a vacuum that China and Russia are going to step into? And now we're going to see a strengthened Iran that's strengthened by our largest adversaries in the world. This is the reality of what we've got to figure out because whether they launch all their rockets in the next 2 weeks, that doesn't mean that's the end of the fight. For all we know, it's going to come back and bite us in 6 months when some Hezbollah cell lights New York on fire. We don't know. But when it happens, arguably it's going to be justified.
To Andrew's point, Iran can wage a war of attrition. It's harder. A war of attrition is basically low-level warfare. Think of like death by 1,000 cuts, right? I'll just keep poking at you enough to eventually wear you down, destabilize you, weaken you. Whereas what you can do is massive retaliation and these big sort of theatrical strikes. War of attrition is basically grinding for the long haul and wearing you down. This is something that, to his point, Iran is capable of doing and is probably willing to do and sees is the only way that it can survive this is a war of attrition.
That?
The war, it's whatever remnant is left.
It's how Russia has survived so long. It's a war of attrition.
But I'm like, who's the lead? Do you need a leader?
Yeah.
Or is it just lots of different pockets of people?
Time will tell, and Hezbollah's sort of cells around the world will tell us what happens. But I think another way of looking at it, I saw a former member of the National Security Council commenting that, like, yes, cells could be activated in America or they could just fade away. And this is where I don't have a crystal ball and I'm just observing what's happening. But I do think that that all of this hangs on the razor's edge of public opinion because, time will tell whether or not this regime falls, whether what you're saying, if it's either or, but I don't think that we can know.
Haven't we been here before to some degree?
Too many times.
Yeah.
Too many times.
What is the lesson from history that everyone seems to have forgotten?
That we are shitty learners of history. That's what the lesson is.
To your point of, who the leadership would be, something else that philosopher I quoted, Eric Hoffer, had said that, mass movements, they don't need a god, but they do need a devil. So to that effect, the leader doesn't matter as much as having an enemy does. That is so basically, so long as we, the United States or the Western world, is framed as the enemy, that is enough to keep a war of attrition going, absent any figurehead or a charismatic leader.
And he was a religious figure versus just a political figure.
He was a religious figure.
But to your point, he was a racketeer at the end. By the end.
Yeah, he was running, effectively.
And everyone, most people in that country
state.
knew that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thousands of people have gathered in public squares in Tehran to openly weep and mourn his death. Roughly 20% of the population are staunch ideological supporters of him.
Yeah, 20% of 90 million. Yeah.
And it's interesting because one can imagine that 20% might grow, especially if the coming months make their lives worse in some way. They experience, poverty or whatever else. And then, friends die because of this war. It doesn't take long for narrative to turn. And
so that's what everyone's been warning about. That you strike Iran, this was the warning last June. You strike Iran, you're going to get rally around the flag. The people that are secularists now are going to turn and they're going to start supporting the regime and we're going to set back the cause of, let's say, freedom or democracy. It didn't happen. It turns out that basically the people in Iran blamed the regime for the misery that was put upon them. And so I think that 20% will get even smaller as a result, not just of this. It would have gotten smaller anyway. As a result of this, I think it'll get even smaller still because their salvation is not at the end, of a turban or a robe. It basically comes with liberty and freedom that this government, this regime won't give them. And so that is, I think, evident now to the 80% of Iranians, all of whom of that mean that, 80% of the population is born after 79. They don't know the old regime. All they know is this one. And what they know is they don't like it. They don't like living under it. And they want anything other than what this is.
You feel differently?
I think that's an overly idealistic way of thinking about it. We failed to convert Iraq when we took out Saddam Hussein. We failed to convert Afghanistan when we took out the Taliban.
Iran is not Iraq and Afghanistan, though. It is not.
I'm not saying it's the same. I'm saying that when you change a government from the top down, that doesn't do anything for the people.
No one's changing it. There's no nation building. We're not going in to do what we did in Iraq.
So what's going to build it?
Constitution.
So what's going to build it? What's going to change it? The people? The people that have been slaves for basically the last, 40, 50 years? The people who have had no education? The people who have been marginalized? You think they're just going to understand how to organize themselves.
Incredibly educated, very, very highly. I mean, it's one of the most educated populaces in the world, and they are very. The people that are not regime supporters are very Western thinking. I mean, we see this. We see this in the culture they produce, the media they produce, when they go and they speak around the world. So the populace is there, the capability is there, the will is there. All they need is basically not to be facing the barrel of a gun.
We are about to find out if that's true, and that is what we are all writing on right now, is whether this intellectual minority in a poverty-stricken, economically defunct country is going to even fucking stay there, or whether they're going to take their brains and their success and their opportunities somewhere else.
The diaspora and everything we're hearing says people cannot wait to help rebuild the country.
Why do you trust what you're hearing?
Well, his family's there, so he's probably he's probably
even
got better
worse. The worst thing you can do is trust the people that you have a personal relationship with. They're the least objective people that you can talk to.
So
who are there 80% of the population?
Who do you talk to?
Exactly. Who do you trust? You can't trust anything that you're hearing right now. You can't trust anything that you're reading right now. The information landscape is too tumultuous.
So who do you trust? You have to trust somebody, right?
It's not paranoid. It's healthy.
It is absolutely paranoid to suggest that everything is misinformation. One would believe, at least I certainly believe, that I have a faculty up here to be able to take information and try and discern what might be misinformation and what isn't, and then also be willing to stand corrected. That's a very important part of it. And that goes back to my tribal problem, is once you have a horse in the race and you become convinced, and I am hearing a little convincedness from you, that, then I believe you lose your ability to be able to go, oh, wow, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this, and again, I'm not condoning what the administration did whatsoever. I'm just listening to Benjamin and saying that is, to my eye, a much better source. I'm a journalist. I'm going to listen to what people on the ground are saying there, certainly family members, because their opinion is going to be legitimately, heartfelt and not propagandized.
Again, we speak a completely different language. When you talk to me about opinion, heartfelt, and family, and belief, none of those are objective. None of those are based on fact.
Rebellions are born on those things, by the way.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it objectively correct. It was a rebellion that ended up in the Iran that we just saw fall apart. That was a revolution. That was a rebellion.
Andrew, where does your skepticism come from? What's it rooted in? Because you did spend almost a decade as an undercover spy for the United States in the CIA. Where is the skepticism coming from? Why shouldn't we believe people on the ground who are saying what they're saying?
I have seen this stuff firsthand. I've been trained in how this stuff works. I've had to deploy this in pursuit of American goals and ambitions in the past. And what you're saying isn't inaccurate as to how people react. We just trust the opinion of the people that we trust the opinion of the people we trust more than we trust the opinion of others, only because it's our opinion that they're trustworthy at all.
So who do you trust to get your information from?
I want to take my information from as far opposite sources as possible and then see where the information confirms itself, where it correlates. Because if you see anti-American people saying the same thing as anti-Iranian people, where their messages are the same has corroboration. The number of dead leaders, as an example. That's a corroborative point because you're hearing both the Iranian state media say that and pro-U.S. Western forces talk about that.
But what if it's, to your point, a black box and you can't get information from the sources you're used to getting from?
Well, that's exactly right. It is a black box. So if we know it's a black box, we have to question every source that comes out, every piece of information that comes out. What we're seeing a lot of right now with Iran is called circular reporting. It's one single source of information that comes out that gets multiplied over and over again. We're seeing it happen in the White House, too, because the White House has kicked out so many journalistic legacy media outlets. So now one story gets multiplied over and over again, and we're seeing stuff that's repeated.
I have to say something. I am a little bit skeptical about what is true. I'm like the furthest from ever being a conspiracy theorist, but a little bit skeptical of what's true because I did a post about this subject. And obviously I've spent 15 years in social media, so our whole business was scaling huge social media audiences. And what I received in my DMs was like I've never seen before.
About what?
I've heard people talking about bots for decades. And most of the time, they're wrong. It's something else going on with the algorithm, or maybe something they don't like they saw, so they call it a bot. I received thousands and thousands and thousands of DMs when I posted about this subject matter. And some of those accounts, when you go on the page and you look at their posting history, their engagement, you look at certain patterns, which we've built tools before to kind of spot. Some of these accounts aren't real. And I said to my friends, I was like, what the fuck? I posted about this issue. And then I had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of these accounts DM me, encouraging me to post more about certain things. First time in my life ever, I go, oh, that was definitely, it was so atypical.
An influence operation.
Just
okay, so what were these
atypical.
bots pushing you to post on?
I'm conscious whether I should say or not, because I don't want to infer.
By doing so,
I'm like inferring that a particular, but I'm just saying I've never felt what I experienced then. And this trailer will come out, we'll see loads of bots, we have systems, but this was in my DMs. It was encouraging someone like me who has a big platform to push a certain narrative. And the only reason I noticed is because of the sheer volume. And then the narrative was almost identical. And I think, 1,700 different accounts are all asking me to do the same thing.
So you have final control over the edit of this.
Yeah.
So there's no, if you don't want what you say to get edited, to get aired, then it'll get cut. But one way or the other, whatever you say, like I want you to say what you saw, because if the narrative was anti-Iran, then you were attacked by Western forces, Western bots attacking a known Westerner. If you were propped up by pro-Iranian cyberbots, then now you're talking about a cyber capacity, a cyber capability in Iran that nobody's talking about. So one way or the other,
or maybe an ally or someone else or whatever it might be. I don't know. But my point was that it's made me skeptical about my own information chamber. And I'll be honest, before I realized what was going on, very persuasive. Very persuasive.
You were persuaded by the bots before you realized they were bots.
Because they're saying nice things to you, and then they're encouraging you to continue to push a certain narrative. And it took me a second to pause and thought, actually, maybe wouldn't that be a perfect strategy in these moments to get people who have big platforms to just bomb their DMs and tell them that, why aren't you standing up for us? And please use your voice to speak on this particular issue. And I thought, actually, maybe I need my information from somewhere else.